Self-made millionaire Steve Siebold says anyone can hit life's jackpot.
Steve Siebold is a world-class expert on mental toughness training for increasing sales, developing people, and managing change. He's a best-selling author and popular television interview guest on mental toughness for building wealth, getting fit, and excelling in sports.
How does a rich person look at money? What do they see? They see
lots of it.
And just available out there in the universe?
It's everywhere, especially with the recession. We have total chaos in the economy all over the world, world economy.
So they see opportunity.
They see opportunity because there's all these problems. Because where there's chaos, there's opportunity to solve problems, to make money.
Someone said that the rich, having made a lot of money last year in the stock market, and maybe some money in the housing market, the rich have an obligation to spend that money to help the economy. And you say?
Why? Why are they obligated? I mean, these people didn't make their money robbing banks. They made their money solving problems.
Because it would be good for the economy.
So is solving problems. I mean, do people want their problems solved or not? If they want their problems solved, you're going to have to look to the innovators, the job producers, the creators.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Steve Siebold.
Hey everyone, welcome. Sorry about that slight delay. This is Steve Siebold, your host of the Personal Development Podcast, and I'm very excited to get started today. We have a great guest that I've known for many years. Actually, we live in the same town up in Gainesville, Georgia, right on the shores here of Lake Lanier. And so let me tell you about our guest, and we're going to get him on here. We have actually a very serious topic that he's going to talk about today that I think is going to help. That's going to help a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to digging into this. But as just an introduction, we're talking about Dr. Bill Lampton, again, Gainesville, Georgia, up here in North Georgia mountains or foothills. Dr. Lampton spent his first part of his career as a speech communication professor at the University of Georgia. Following his academic career, he spent 2 decades applying his communication expertise at the vice presidential level or higher in higher education and healthcare. In 1997, Bill launched his company, Championship Communication, where he serves top-tier corporate clients as a keynote speaker, communication consultant, and coach. Some of his clients include Gillette, Procter & Gamble, Ritz-Carlton, Oceana Cruises, the University of Georgia Athletic Association, British Columbia Legal Management Association, and the Missouri Bar. So Bill's done a lot of work across a lot of industries, helping a lot of people with communication. Realizing the unlimited coaching potential of YouTube, he's produced 500 training videos, a lot of really great videos. He's done a lot of shorts you can check out recently. Great stuff. The more recent ones hosting prominent communication experts on his weekly Biz Communication show, which I was actually a guest on recently. Great show. We had a great time. Bill's the author of 2 books on communication. He works with clients who want to communicate clearly, confidently, creatively, charismatically, and convincingly, and using C's. So that's what the business communication guy will help you accomplish. And as a side note, Bill actually has been a freelance radio host for a couple of decades. He actually had a chance to be a guest broadcaster for the Atlanta Classic, which is a PGA golf tournament interviewing Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player. So without any further delay, please welcome my good friend, my old friend, Dr. Bill Lampton. Hey, Bill.
Hi there, Steve. It's great to be with you. Of course, rather than old friend, I would prefer a longtime friend.
Yeah, good. Well, you're the communication guy, so I stand corrected. Longtime friend. That makes us both seem younger, Bill.
Yes, and I appreciate that very fine introduction. Being here with you is a true privilege.
Well, I appreciate you being on, Bill. We're gonna have a lot of fun here, and we've got Bill's website kind of scrolling on the bottom there. If you want to take that down, it's bizcommunicationguy.com. Any kind of I highly recommend Bill's work. He's been doing this, like we said, for a long time, and so check him out, check his website out, and again his YouTube channel. So today we're going to take a little. I asked Bill to kind of do me a favor here for the show. Him and I were having lunch recently. Again, we live about 5 miles from each other. And we were having lunch recently, and we were talking about how long, we'd been married, and I've been married for almost 40 years, and Bill was married for 62 years before he lost his wife, Sandra. And so we were talking a little bit about that at the restaurant, and I went home and I was telling my wife about it, and I was thinking, it would really be for personal development. Of course, that's what we're all about. It would really be great just to hear his thoughts on, what it takes to overcome the loss of a beloved spouse that, you're married to for 62 years. I mean, I can't even imagine that. And I think a lot of people probably can't. And so I asked Bill, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to, I wanted to be very sensitive about it because it has not been that long since Sandra, his wife, passed away. And I wasn't sure how he'd feel about it, but he agreed to it. And I really appreciate you doing that, Bill, because I think you're going to help a lot of people with, with your thoughts. So,
well, yes, I said yes to your invitation quite quickly because of the way you phrased it, that there are other people who are going through the loss of a spouse. There are others who will be. And as you and I said, unless a couple happens to be, let's say, in an accident together, it's usually only in the movies when a couple goes at exactly the same time. So the separation, the loss is almost inevitable. And the way we look at it is truly critical to how we spend the rest of our lives. So that's why I happily agreed to talk with you on this very touching subject.
Well, we really appreciate it, Bill. I agree with that. I think it can help a lot of people. And so just to kind of get started, I know you guys have been married you were married for 62 years. So tell us how you met.
Sandra and I were living in the same small hometown in south central Mississippi, Columbia, Mississippi. I was older than her. I was the older guy at 17. She was 14. And one day when I came home from college, I went to the First Methodist Church there. Her family belonged there. Mine did too. I did not know her. I tapped my aunt on the shoulder. She was sitting in front of me, and I said, "Who is that beautiful girl on the second row there?" And from there, I, of course, contacted her. We started dating. And I'll give you an interesting point that I hadn't even thought about mentioning, and that is that at one point, like most young couples who are madly in love, we got disenchanted. We started dating other people. And she would admit to this only later. But when I was in college and she was still in high school, I wrote her a letter and said that I really thought we should get back together. And this is an actual case. This is not something on television. She admitted to me later that when she went to her college campus mailbox to pick up her mail, she had a similar letter that she was going to mail to me that day, that we should get back together. Of course, she wouldn't tell me that until later, but that led to us getting back together, dating, and getting married when I was 21 and she was 19.
Wow, that's a great story. And how long was it before she told you about the letter she was going to write?
I would imagine that was several years.
Okay, she kept that one kind of hidden. There you go.
Right.
Well, tell us a little bit about Sandra.
Sandra, as I just mentioned, was a strikingly lovely young lady. She won some beauty contests, including the County Forestry Queen. She was very active and popular in high school. There's a lovely picture of Sandra.
Yeah.
That was on a cruise. She was very popular. And also, I was going to mention that, and you have brought that there. She was a beauty queen. She then went to college, and that's when we did our occasional corresponding in college. And then that day when I mailed the letter and said we should get back together in adult life, Sandra was a strong family person. She let and helped me get my degrees and the daughters get their degrees. And finally she said, it's my turn. So she got her undergraduate and her master's degree at Brenau University here in Gainesville, Georgia, and taught. She was a beloved teacher, second grade, for about 25 years.
Wow, that's something else. What year did she pass away, Bill?
It was 2019, and this October, that will be 5 years.
Wow. So was she sick for a long time, or?
Yes, for the last 2 years of her life, and it was rather ironic, Steve, because she was, I won't call her a fitness freak, but she certainly was a fitness advocate. She had a personal trainer. She went to exercise at least 3 days a week in addition to the personal trainer. And my daughter said one time when they visited here, Dad, there's not a fat gram anywhere in this house.
Wow.
She was very physically active. We loved making Caribbean trips. We were beach lovers, but none of that, unfortunately, protects you from what might come later. And I think I can sum it up quickly by saying the last 2 years of her life were very dreadful. She had spinal stenosis. She had scoliosis. She had 4 trips, I believe, to the emergency room. She had 23 days in the hospital. And in one of those emergency room trips, the next time she saw a doctor, he said, we believe that you have contacted an infection. And that didn't mean very much to us, but then they told us it was an infection called C. diff. And again, we didn't know. So they explained that that was a colon infection and it could be deadly. So she got on regular strong medications. She began a weight loss. At her regular prime, she was a little over 5'3", and she weighed about 105 pounds. Steve, when she drew her last breath on this earth, she had gone to 74 pounds.
Wow.
And then, of course, there was the other side of it, the dementia side. And with the dementia side, she had an increasingly serious decline there, so that it affects a couple of ways. And one, of course, is your memory starts going, and then also control of your emotions. And one of the things the home health people told me about a year before her move to her heavenly home, one of the things they told me was one reason that she will express so much anger over the next few months is that subconsciously she knows that she has lost control of her life. And I could give several incidences of public anger and private anger. And then also there was a lot of confusion. And I think one day it hit me the hardest when she looked at me and she said, how do you cut on this dryer? And of course, the washing machine and the dryer she had cut on for many years. And then one more point about her illness. We tried pain management treatment, but they told us that with pain management after 3 times that it was having no positive effect on her and she would probably have to have back surgery. At age 81, that would have been very challenging. And it was only a few weeks after that that she, as I put it, took her last breath here. After a long time of losing control mentally, emotionally, and physically. Very sad for her, very sad for those who loved her, including her friends.
Yeah, I'll bet that had to be a really rough time for the whole family, I imagine. Wow. Tell us about your first year. You know how they talk about, when a spouse passes away, the first year is so difficult. How did you get through that first year, Bill?
There are a number of ways that I certainly was not doing it alone. It would be a very serious mistake and almost an impossible task to begin to recover your life if you try to do it alone. I have two magnificent daughters. We had two magnificent daughters. One lives in Columbia, South Carolina, about a 3.5 hour drive. The other one in Savannah, Georgia, about a 5.5 hour drive. And they have been very faithful, certainly all during her illness. They came here, they talked on the phone, they helped me make all kinds of arrangements. So family was and still is so vital. And if you were to follow me on Facebook, you would find pictures of me with my daughters very often. They've been very successful in every way, and they have been so incredibly reaching out to me. I'll mention a couple of other steadfast ways that I was able to stabilize my life. One would be a grand group of friends. I had at her memorial service, the golf buddies that I'd had for 15 or 20 years, they all showed up. And in fact, this is quite impressive. One of my golf buddies who had moved out of town 8 years previously to Moultrie, Georgia, which is, I believe, a 5-hour drive, he drove here that day of the memorial service and drove back the same day. So I had a wonderfully dedicated group of friends, my neighbors, the same. I have a very strong, sustaining faith, the faith that got me through all of those struggles, and the faith that assures me that we will be together again. And then I would also mention that I began a program of self-care, because a caregiver has to have their total attention on the person who needs them the most. And I had been many months without adequate sleep or recreation or networking. And for the first time, I started sleeping 8 hours a night. And all of these together, including one that I certainly shouldn't omit, including having a strong purpose still professionally. Many people, when they lose a mate, they have, unfortunately, they may have no goal. They have no goal, they have no activities. And that old saying, Steve, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. That's what happens. And the depression you mentioned comes on them very strongly. Many people at my stage of life would have been retired a long time ago, but I love what I do. I love teaching and coaching communication and speaking about it. And so all of those put together have given me stability and serenity and strength that I would never have had on my own.
Wow. It sounds like a good varied strategy. Well, what got you through the darkest times, Bill? I'm sure there were times during that first year where, they were tougher than others. What got you through those times besides some of the things that you mentioned?
My answer may be surprising. I believe that what got me through the darkest times was relief. Relief that she did not have to go through what she had endured for 2 years. And the first dream I had about her, and I haven't had many, but the first dream was about 2 weeks later. And that night I dreamed that I saw Sandra running, and she hadn't been able to walk for quite a long time. And unfortunately, about a week before her demise, she and I were walking up the steps to our house. She was holding my hand. She slipped out of my hand, fell on the concrete, broke her arm, and then was confined to a wheelchair. So the relief I had was that my dream was true, that somewhere, somehow in the celestial world, she's running again. She's cheerleading again. She's on those Caribbean beaches that we enjoyed so much. She's in Italy, where we traveled. She's teaching her class again, those kids who loved her so much. So the main item for me that helped was, I'm going through a lot right now, but Sandra's not struggling through anything, and that's a warming thought.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Well, as a communications master, something you've done your entire career, what do you say? What do you say when you talk to yourself? What did you say, and what do you say now, even that helped you get through all this?
You remind me of one of my favorite books. I don't know if you've read it, but it's Shad Helmstetter's book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And I read that book 25 or 30 years ago. I still teach that it's so important. Before you talk to anybody else, even, you really need to have a good talk with yourself, because what we say to ourselves shapes our world, our thinking, our lives. And so what I said to myself, first of all, was gratitude. I can be grateful. How many couples are together for 62 years? I'm not going to pretend that we were Ozzie and Harriet of television. I'm not going to pretend that our marriage was described in Harlequin romance. We were a realistic couple. But given the good times and the bad times, the warm times and the cold times, overall, I was greatly blessed. And so gratitude has been a stronghold for me. Now, there were adjustments that took a long time to make, such as, and some adjustments needed to be made. I switched churches. We had been going to the same church for 30 years. I couldn't go back there and see where we had sat in that same pew virtually for 30 years, even though I'm in the house where I see all kinds of reminders. For a long time, I couldn't watch many photos. And then eventually, a month or two ago, for the first time, I was able to watch a video of the two of us together and hear her talk. Those things take a lot of healing and a lot of help, and some courage before you can do them again.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, I'll bet that does take a lot of time. What were there any messages that you got from friends or family or any other source that kind of helped ease your, the feelings of depression at times or that type of thing?
The main messages, Steve, were that they were there. It didn't matter what they said, especially. And not long ago, I produced a video and I've written articles about what do you say when you go to a memorial service. Many people stay away from memorial services because they say, gee, I wouldn't know what to say. Guess what? Nobody cares what you say. They just care that you're there. So as far as any specific words, it was the nonverbal, the presence, the support that I knew because they came to me. And then I had neighbors who, as is a Southern tradition, would bring plates of food by, or I walked my neighborhood a lot with my dog, and they would make nice comments. I couldn't tell you what they said now, but it's a knowing that there is not an aloneness, that there is a true fellowship of people who are there for you even stronger than they were before.
So it's more of a matter of people just showing up as opposed to what they said to you.
That's right. That's right. I went to a memorial service in Athens, Georgia recently, Steve, where there were about 400 people. It was a longtime friend of mine, very prominent. People stood in line for 2.5 hours to speak to the family at the reception. And can you imagine the family remembering anything anybody said? No, but they know who was there. They don't even have to look at the register that people signed. They know who was there. So if you're someone who's saying, I've got a friend or a neighbor or a work colleague who's lost somebody, and gosh, I'm at a loss for words, that's okay. Just be with them. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Just let them know you're on hand and you're at hand and you're on call.
That's really interesting perspective that you say it that way. How about this, Bill? How long was it before you could think about Sandra and kind of laugh and smile? How long did it take to get to that point?
It took a few months. We had a favorite restaurant here in Gainesville that we went to every Friday night for 32 years. And so when my daughters came after the memorial services, they came visiting, we went back to that restaurant. And I'm a guy who's my emotions are very much, as we say, on my sleeve. And the first couple of times we went back there and I shook hands with the longtime owners, tears ran down my face and I cried openly. So it does take a while. It's not as though you lose your feelings. You still feel as strongly, but your life somehow makes adjustments. And a part of it, of course, as I said earlier, is making sure that you continue to create a life of your own by your self-talk, by having a purpose. And you and I talked about even having a pet is great therapy for people who've had a loss. And I would say to somebody, if you're alone for the first time, you don't have to be alone. And I can tell quickly, I think, but the way we got our little toy poodle, Georgia, Sandra and I woke up on our anniversary 10 years ago. And I said to her, oh, yeah, there's Georgia, my beloved toy poodle. We woke up on our anniversary. I said, okay, it's our anniversary. What do you want? Jewelry? You want a trip? What do you want? She said, no, I want a puppy. And we talked about that before. And I said, oh, that'd be a lot of trouble and so on. But do you know, Steve, we got that puppy, but we didn't get it for a long time. We didn't get it until that afternoon. No. She had it all planned out. She looked at places that puppies were available. And so a few days later we went and I cradled little Georgia in my arms. And when all my family had left and my daughters had gone back home, there was little Georgia. Oh, I've got to throw this in, Steve. Speaking of my daughters and speaking of them leaving after that week when they helped me settle so many things. That night, they knew that for the first time in 62 years, I was going to be alone. For the first time in 32 years in this house, I was going to be alone. So as I was getting into bed that night, they knew I would be very tearful and sorrowful and lonely. But they took care of that, Steve, because when I pulled back the covers, they had short-sheeted the bed. And I tell that to some people and they think that's almost sacrilege. Why would they do that? Oh no, that was what Shakespeare would call comic relief in the middle of tragedy. And that's the kind of relationship, grand relationship, warm relationship I have with my daughters, and we still laugh about that.
That's a great story. Well, tell us more about how your daughters helped you get through the process. What was their role?
They came here at times it was very inconvenient for them. They're both employed. One's a pharmacist, the other one a speech pathologist. They're very successful in their professional life. But one example would be that there was a Friday night when Sandra and I were going to our usual restaurant. We were about to, but at 5 p.m., she said, I don't think I can go. I've got an abdominal pain. And it got so severe, we went to an emergency room in Brazelton, the hospital there, about 25 minutes away. They could not see her right away. And for an hour and a half, she sat on my lap crying and in great pain. When the doctor came to see her, she said, "You can go home because it'll take us a while to make a diagnosis and we'll call you." They called me at 11 p.m. and said, "We're going to do emergency surgery at 1 a.m." So I went back and waited through that and talked to my daughters, and the one from Savannah was there practically right away. So that's just one example. And one time, the daughter from Columbia, South Carolina, called me and said, "Dad, I'm coming. It sounds like I need to be there." And she got to Greenville, South Carolina, which is halfway. And Sandra said, "It's okay. I'm okay. She doesn't need to come." So she turned around and went back to her home in Columbia, South Carolina. They were willing to do anything and everything, all types of support. And while I gave Sandra 18 prescribed pills every day as her caregiver, they gave her a lot of love and me and wonderful support.
Well, that might have made a big difference to have the girls there and helping you and supporting you all the way.
Yes, because we know of families where somebody has to go it alone, and that's a very daunting challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you had mentioned Georgia, your little dog. How did Georgia help you get through the process, especially in the first year or two?
It's because there's my little baby. It's because the house is not silent. It's never silent. And I talk to her all day long. And of course, you're a pet owner, and you know that the pets, what's the saying about them? It's really true. Unconditional love. No matter if you stay away 3 hours and you come back, there's this marvelous greeting. And Georgia cuddles up beside me on the sofa when I'm going to watch TV at night. We walk between 1.5 miles and 2 miles a day together because, you know, Steve, all the work that you do on computers and reading and writing and technical stuff that we have to get away. And so I take about 4 or 5 walks with her a day, not when it's 96 degrees. We have to be aware of those conditions, but we always walk 4 to 5 to even 6 times a day. And again, this gives me good fellowship with neighbors too. But little Georgia, when I come home from anything I've been out doing, it's as though I were gone a month. You know how it is with pets. So I advise anyone who's a lonely person. There are lonely pets out there. There are lonely pets who would love an owner. And you and I were talking about a bumper sticker we've seen, and the bumper sticker says, "Who rescued who?" we say we rescued the dog, but in so many ways they rescued us, and certainly that's true with Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pets are important, no question about it. I talk to mine all day too. They just sort of look at me, but I'm convinced they understand somehow.
They do.
Yeah. Well, what was one of the things that through the process of the last 5 years since Sandra's been gone, how did this change you? Did it change you in any meaningful way? And if so, how?
I think it changed me in that it challenged me a lot. I was challenged during her illness, of course, but then when you're alone, you're challenged another way. For example, when you're alone, nobody's going to tell you how long or how much you drank. You could form some pretty bad habits. Nobody's going to tell you who you can see, where you can go, how long you can be gone, how you treat your pet, and so on. And then I was challenged, Steve, by having to learn to feed myself. Here again, the daughters came to the rescue, so that now I know how to grocery shop. I know how to do some light cooking. I have good meals. I have a steady diet, and I again, a person has a choice. You could just let everything go, and you could let your health habits go. So I've been very diligent about that. I realize there's a responsibility when you're living with someone else. Maybe it's a bigger challenge when you live by yourself because there's nobody to tell you no or that you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. For those of us, just like you, I've been married since I was 20 years old. I've never lived by myself. I had a dorm room in college, of course, but I had a roommate. And, literally, I've been married for almost 40 years. I literally I'm not making this up. I just cooked eggs for the first time like 3 days ago on my own because I thought I'm not going to die before I learn to cook eggs. And I thought, how tough can this be? I watched a YouTube video, cooked that. It's funny that those little things that, if you're married for a long time, you sort of have roles, as you know, and some of the stuff I've just never done, just never. And so now all of a sudden you're on your own, and it's like, it's a big adjustment.
I think what that does too is tell you how much your mate was doing. For example, she, as I mentioned, taught for 25 years. During that 25 years, our kids were already gone, but during those 25 years, she was responsible for the shopping, the cooking, the housekeeping, travel plans. She like many wives, had to multitask. And then suddenly, even though I thanked her for it then and let her know I appreciated it, when you do it yourself and realize all that they did and still somehow kept a smile going, it's a learning experience.
Yeah, no question about that. Yeah, wow. How about this, Bill? What was the thing that surprised you the most going through the grieving process in the last 5 years? Was there something that kind of stuck out that surprised you?
Yes, and that would be that, and everybody has cycles of grief. Some have it hit them very hard at one time and some in another. Well, certainly it hit me hard initially. But I would say definitely, Steve, that 2 years later, there was another hurdle. And that hurdle was, we talk all our lives about the words permanent and the words lasting, lasting separation, permanent separation. And the first year or the first year and a half with me, those were words. But then when it gets to 2 years, and again, that's just my case. Other people might experience it differently. But when I got to 2 years, I realized, yes, that is it. You expect and plan to see her in the next life, but in this one, you will not again. And that in a sense was a harder hurdle than the initial hurdles.
Just the idea that it was just so permanent, I guess.
Yes, that's it. Period. Finish.
It must just take time to process. Is that what you chalk it up to?
That's right. That was my situation. Other people may not have that aftershock. It may be all theirs at first, or with some it could be 4 years. I have not studied this, so I don't know.
That's interesting. Did you read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on death and dying? You remember that book?
I remember that book. I read it many years ago. I think I read it many years ago. What I relate to more contemporary is the movie The Notebook. And Sandra and I saw that movie several years before she was diagnosed with dementia. And those who are familiar with the movie The Notebook might have read recently one of the biggest ironies I've ever heard, Steve, that Gina Rowlands, who played the adult part of the couple, along with James Garner, the husband, and she had very severe dementia in the movie. And just recently, at age 94, it was announced that she has had dementia for 2 years. And in the last 7 years, extreme examples of it. So I do remember vaguely that book that you mentioned, but I focus more on The Notebook. Strangely enough, I've seen snippets of that movie recently. I'm not sure I could sit through the whole movie, but I believe it was on TikTok. I saw some snippets of it. It was a wonderful portrayal of what happens to a family with dementia.
That's interesting. Well, what role, if any, Bill, did guilt play or has guilt played in the last 5 years? Did you, in other words, in the context of when you started sort of living, going forward again, did you feel guilty at all about feeling good again? Or do you know what I mean? Was there any role there for guilt, with guilt?
I think the guilt many people feel after they lose a spouse, they look back at, in my case, the 62 years and think of mistakes I made, times that I was inconsiderate, times that I wasn't very loving or attentive. I think back to that. As far as current guilt, to me, there are two ways to look at life. One is through the windshield, and one is through the rear view mirror. And the rear view mirror is something we can't change, but we can change what's ahead of us. So would I feel guilty about having a stable life, having adjusted to grief through this wonderful support group I've mentioned, my faith, my family, my friends, my profession, my pet, my memories of all the great times we've had? Do I feel guilty that I have some serenity now, that I can sleep well at night? No. I think that's what Sandra would want for me, and I think that's what God and my family want for me.
Well, that's good. I just wondered about that in terms of, like you said, I think you said it well with the rearview mirror or the windshield. That's probably what keeps that out of there, right?
Yes.
Bill, what advice, as we wrap up here, what advice would you offer people who are either going through this process right now and it's fresh, or those of us who are going to go through it at some point, or have some percentage, chance of going through it in the future? What would be your best advice for coping through this?
I'll address first the people who will be going through it. My advice there would be talk about it. Talk about it. It's, as we said at the outset of this conversation, Steve, it's practically inevitable that one of you will leave this life first. Talk about it. The last week of Sandra's time here on earth, we sat in the sofa in our living room, little Georgia by our side, and she knew from the serious decline she'd had, 105 pounds to 74 pounds, losing her cognition, losing control of her temper, not having successful pain management. She knew it was about over. So each of those last 5 nights, we sat on the sofa and she said, "What is heaven going to be like?" In other words, I think couples need to discuss the fact that this is going to happen and talk about some of the practical aspects of it. For example, Sandra and we both had living wills. And when she had her final emergency and the rescue crew attempted to revive her in my house, they said, "Do you have a living will?" And I did. So couples need a living will. They need a determination of what's going to happen with themselves, their property, their children. But even above that, I think, is to face the reality and talk about, we've had a great time. We've been blessed. We've had a wonderful life. And I know you will miss me, but I want you to live your life to the fullest as we have lived our lives to the fullest together.
Wow. That's great advice, Bill. I really appreciate you taking time to talk about this. I know this is not your normal thing. I know you're normally talking about communication skills and helping executives and organizations with communication. And I really appreciate this. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of this because, as you and I spoke the other day about this, there's no training. We don't get trained for this. No, nor do we get trained for so many different things. Right. And this is one of them you have to sort of work through on your own. So I really appreciate you taking time to talk about this subject. I know it's a very sensitive thing.
I appreciate the privilege. And this is certainly the first time I've talked publicly like that. I've talked individually, of course, to friends, but this is the first time in a public forum. But I'll reiterate what I said at the first. I do that in hopes that what you and I have discussed will help people who go through that time, which is one of the most challenging times anybody could face, and that's losing your mate. And I hope what we have said will keep people in preparation for that, and then also how to face that when it happens in your situation.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill. And I know that, again, you're normally talking about communication skills and it seems like one of the things that really helped you move forward is to continue your business. I mean, I know a lot of people, you played golf for many years. I know you're a big golfer but you continue to work with organizations and I know you're very successful at it and it's really helped you. So if people watching this can understand, what a great communicator you are, and you certainly are that. How can they if they want to contact you for communication skills training or anything else that you do, how can they, besides the communicate, we have the website on the bottom of the screen, guys, bizcommunicationguy.com. What's the best way to get in touch with you besides the website, Bill?
I would be glad to talk with any of our viewers and listeners, either about the topic that we have gone through during this conversation, or if you want to talk about communication skills and how I can assist you with that. Certainly, I'm open to talking with you. Thank you for that invitation. And my telephone number is 678-316-4300. Again, 678-316-4300.
Or bizcommunicationguy.com, right?
Yes, exactly. That's the website. And of course, you mentioned those 500 YouTube training videos. That's free to watch. You'll find me on YouTube. Put in the search bar Bill Lampton, PhD, and all those freebies are waiting for you, including my interview not long ago with Steve Siebold.
That sounds great, Bill. Well, again, I appreciate you being on. Great seeing you again. We got to get together for lunch again soon. And I'm really glad that you're doing well and you're up and running and you're moving forward, my friend.
Well, I thank you for moving back to Gainesville, Georgia.
Yeah, happy to be here and be close by.
That gave us a chance to share lunches and ideas, and we've already shared many technical items that one of us knew and the other one didn't, and so we've got a great partnership. Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to the future. More to come, Bill. Again, thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for today. I'm very grateful. Thank you. Thanks, Bill. And thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Personal Development Podcast. Take care, guys.